Personal interest and my professional interest have intersected over the years. Film in Australia on SBS, it was on SBS, and I thought, no, this is good, you know. Brutal industry, you know, because there's so much about ego, and it's very difficult to make a living doing kind of work that you want to do in this area of media. Yes, I do. Hey, my name is Dr Enda Murray, and I'm a filmmaker. I'm originally from Drogheda on the banks of the Boyne in Ireland, and I have left Ireland in 1985, and so I spent 10 years in England, and I've now been in Australia for 30 years. So my personal interest and my professional interest have intersected over the years. I began filmmaking in Ireland. I actually have a degree in science, in biology, but I never pursued that. In Ireland in the 80s, it was very bad economics, and so the chances of work were very slim. So I was doing some other things and got interested in film, and then I moved to London and did more film, and then I did an MA at St Martin's School of Art in London, and then I at that point it was like, oh right, I really enjoy this. This is something I'm interested in. And then the next thing was, how do I make a living? So this has always been the challenge. You love something, but at the same time you've got to make a living. So how do you combine the two? And so in England I started making films, and so the first time I got a credit as a director for TV, you know, my first broadcast credit, and this was a documentary about Jamaican musicians, Jamaican sound system. So at that point I was looking around at other migrant groups in where I was living in Coventry, and I was interested in other migrant groups, and I think that was the second thing that came, was the interest in migrant groups, because I was a migrant myself, but not just Irish, but other migrant groups, and realizing that the experience of other migrant groups is the same as my experience, and so this was something that I continued to explore. I moved to Australia 30 years ago, and then I was very interested in trying to make bigger films with bigger budget, so I could pay myself, because up to this, you know, I had a day job. I made the films in my spare time, but yeah, I became very passionate about using media in political activism. So that was my other interest, was environmentalism, social justice, and yeah, that was another passion, to give a voice to people who don't have a voice. So what I thought was a big film in Australia on SBS. It was on SBS, and I thought, no, this is good, you know, big budget. And then I made a and this was with Indigenous guys in Redfern in Sydney, and working with non-actors, which was another interest that I had with, again, giving voices to people who don't have voices, and this fascination with how media can do this, give you agency, maybe because I come from quite poor background, so I was interested in giving other people agency, because I feel I don't have it myself. So I think maybe this is personally, what has inspired me. But made a second film with SBS with guys from Middle East in Bankstown, again working with non-actors, and this was a feature film, a drama, and again was on SBS, again big budget, and I thought, now I'm going to be able to make a living with this, but very, very difficult, almost impossible, I think. Very difficult to make a living doing kind of work that you want to do in this area of media. So that brought me to the point where I started doing PhD, because I thought I then had 2 kids, and I thought, well, my wife said, you got to put the bread on the table, you got to earn some money. So then I did a PhD, and yeah, again looking at my connection to home, and I became interested in intercultural filmmaking, people who make films in their new country, and and then I've continued this. But yeah, all the time, it's a problem how to combine making a living with doing things that you making work that you want to make, that you think is important, and the 2 things are one the social justice come from my own background. You know, coming from a family of 14 children, I go to university and they say, no, you can't have a grant because you don't tick the boxes. I think, well, that's not fair, that's not just. And then when I go to university, I find the other guys in university come from much, more wealthy backgrounds. It's a constant problem to balance your creative urges as an artist, as someone who wants to create stuff, with the reality of having to pay bills and having to earn money. So the way I've been trying to do that is to try and always have some kind of income generation alongside the creative stuff. So to do some commissions and try and get into that area where I could get some income for the skills that I've got as a producer and as a director and as a camera person. So that's been one way in terms of reconciling the professional with the creative. The personal aspect of it, it's also difficult to reconcile the two, because your time becomes money, and especially when you've got family commitments and you've got young children, you can't be going off spending lots and lots of time away from home, or being not present. I just think it's a never-ending problem. I come from a family background where there was no tradition of working in the arts. So, I got from my parents, get a proper job, get a real job. Whereas I think if I had come from a background where people were successful in the arts, they wouldn't have a problem with me wanting to be an artist. And so it took a while to get to the point where you can think, oh, actually, I can be working in the arts and I can make a living. And so I think I have probably at the point where I did my MA in London, and I realised, no, this is something I enjoy doing. I'm going to, you know, I'm going to keep on doing it, and I'll work the other stuff around it, because for me, I had to keep on doing this creative work. Otherwise, I'm not going to be a happy person. So, and that's not a good place to be. So, I think luckily I have been able to find my way and to make ends meet. I'm not a wealthy person, and it is a problem when you're working with the arts, because you're working project to project, and so you know, you don't have the big super you know, that big nest egg at the end of your career. But yeah, if you find other people who are also you know, artists, then you are with like-minded people. You found your tribe. I would say probably the emotional problems stem from the economic problems. You know, that with family, where you've got to earn money to put bread on the table. When you start to have to be responsible for other people, as in children, rather than just it being about yourself. So that's one thing. The other thing is, I think you know, the need. Why do people make work, and especially working in film? It's a very, very brutal industry. You know, because there's so much about ego and success, and the measures that are used to measure success. So it takes a long time to realize, you know, that there are different measures to success, and finance is just one of them. So you know, to be able to take pride and take pleasure in doing community arts work, for example, and seeing smiles on people's faces, and you know, that is something that is satisfying. I think that the balance between financial pressures and creative pressures are always going to be there, and especially because today's values, you know, there's a lot of pressure towards being financially successful. You know, we even have it from the top with Donald Trump. The idea that you know, what is important is the finance, and this is the only metric that is being used, and so the problem of financial pressures are always there, and I really can't see any changes in the near future. I think it's just about you know, holding on to those ideas about what is important for you and for those around you, and take inspiration from people like Mary Robinson or Nelson Mandela, those kind of guys who are focused on doing the right thing. You know, you get very obsessed with success, and it's personally and emotionally very difficult when you have ideas and those ideas are not accepted, or, you know, not supported, or not financed. So it's definitely a tough industry. It's a brutal industry to be in, yeah, a lot of it is about smoke and mirrors, about giving the appearance of being successful. That's what a lot of media is all about. So. That doesn't help when you seem to be surrounded by, gloss and glitter and success. So my cultural background is very important at the moment because I'm very involved with exploring Irish culture through the Irish Film Festival, which I actually began 11 years ago, and that is it's quite successful. At the moment, we go to 5 cities and we bring over contemporary Irish films. So it's really about ideas and ideas coming out of Ireland. And for me, it keeps that working on this project keeps that connection with Ireland. I go back there to find films for the festival, and also in my filmmaking, I've been making short films which explore Irish culture in Australia, and I suppose having had the experience of trying to raise money for big projects and having been unsuccessful with that, just to fall back on the making smaller films and short films where I can be confident that I'll get some funding and I'll make a short film, rather than spending years and years writing applications and getting rejected, which is soul destroying. I think as a migrant, it is difficult to adjust to the cultural expectations of your host country, and so a person who doesn't have what they call the old school tie. You don't have the connections there, so you've lost that. That's what you've lost in moving from the place where you grew up to this new country, so yes, it has influenced it, and probably in a negative way. I suppose when I went to London first, I didn't really connect with Irish community. I was a bit younger, and I followed my own path. But since coming to Australia, I've connected more with Irish established groups within Australian society, so Irish cultural groups, and I think that connection has helped me to just to make ends meet and to get some satisfaction. Well, my long-term ambitions would be, they're not very long-term at this point. No, my long-term ambitions would be to, I suppose, leave a legacy where, say, the Irish Film Festival is sustainable and is going to be carried on, and that the work that I do would have some use and some acceptability in the future, or a recognition. I think that I suppose some of the films I've made because I thought, oh, this is important stuff, and down the line somebody's going to realise that this is important stuff, and they'll watch it and get something back from it. So I still have that approach. Yeah, there are a lot of challenges. Societally, the type of work that I'm doing is becoming more difficult to make because the society is more focused on bums on seats and as the metric for success. So it is more difficult to find ways to make work that is important, and I don't think that that's going to get any easier. So it's a constant challenge. So one of the things I think is important is to try and combine your creative work with your professional work. And so if you're an editor, that you can make a living doing professional jobs and working on commercial jobs, and that will give you some comfort in that you have got security, and that there'll always be a place for some creativity. And likewise, if you're a camera person, that you can work on commercials, God forbid, but in the commercial space and earn a living with that, and then you will have the space to create stuff on the side. I suppose my own experience back when I was younger, I thought, it's got to be just this, the work that matters, and I'm not interested in the commercial side. And then down the track, I found, I was suffering because I didn't have a steady, consistent income, and so I think that's the advice that I give to younger people, is to try and combine the creative stuff with the professional stuff, and then okay, it's maybe not the most enjoyable thing to have to edit baked beans commercials, but it's better than having to work in KFC, to make the money. I think if you can combine them, then you're always learning and always getting more skills. One of the advantages of the migrant stories is they're often much more interesting than the vanilla stories of people who have grown up in surrounded by comfort. You find that there's plenty of material in migrant stories for comedy and for conflict. So I always found that these stories were much more interesting to me and much more enjoyable to hear.